She made the announcement just after the third course of the captain's dinner, right as the violinist hit a high note, and the waiter placed a perfectly seared filet mignon in front of me. "I'm in love with someone else," she said, in the same casual voice she'd used to comment on the lobster bisque. Everything around me froze. The silverware, the music, the fake candlelight flickering off the wine glasses. I blinked once, twice, and then looked up. Her lipstick was too red. Her dress, tight and glittering gold, suddenly seemed like a costume. She was smiling. Smiling. "I'm leaving you, Thomas," she added, like she was finishing a shopping list. "After this cruise." "No, actually, during. I'm staying with him. With Ryan." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My tongue felt like it had turned to concrete. She swirled her wine, took a slow sip, and glanced to the far end of the dining hall. That's when I saw him. The ship's piano player. Young. Thin. Cocky as hell. He had that lazy charm women in their midlife crises mistake for mystery. He didn't even try to look away when I caught his eye. Just raised his glass like we were teammates celebrating a job well done. My hands stayed flat on the table. My fork lay untouched. Inside, I was splitting down the middle. 2 hours earlier, I was standing on the bow with her. She was wrapped in my coat, her hair dancing in the wind. She looked at me like she used to, like I was her world. We talked about moving to the coast, starting pottery classes together, adopting a dog. She kissed me then, gently, on the cheek. I didn't know that would be the last time. Now, here I sat, a prop in my own life story, surrounded by strangers in tuxedos and dresses, pretending like my heart hadn't just been carved out and handed to a second-rate lounge act with a keyboard. "I'm not going back to Missouri," she added, dabbing the corners of her mouth like nothing had happened. "I've felt dead for years, Tom. You and we've just been roommates." This cruise made me realize that. No. What made her realize it, I thought, was the private piano lessons she'd been sneaking off to. The ones she said were relaxing. The ones that lasted 2 hours and left her breathless and glowing. I remember nodding. Just once. Not because I agreed, but because I finally understood. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confession. A declaration. And the final nail in a marriage coffin I didn't even know had been built. But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. The morning after she dropped the bomb felt unreal, like waking up in a foreign body. My side of the bed was cold. Laura's robe was gone from the bathroom hook. No note. Not even a damn text. Just her signature scent still hanging in the cabin's air, a mix of vanilla and expensive betrayal. I sat on the balcony, still in yesterday's shirt, watching the sun rise over endless water, wondering what I had done in my life to end up here, on a ship full of retirees and honeymooners, utterly humiliated and completely alone. She wasn't back. She hadn't returned to our room after dinner. I already knew where she was, even before I saw it with my own eyes. Deck 7. The lounge. There she sat, in the arms of that scrawny 20-something piano boy, Ryan. His shirt was half unbuttoned, hair freshly tousled like he wanted the world to know he didn't sleep alone. And Laura? She looked like a woman auditioning for a role in a bad soap opera, laughing too loudly, tracing her fingers along the rim of her mimosa glass, whispering in his ear like a teenager drunk on her first rebellion. She looked right past me. Not through me. Past me. Like I was a stranger who just happened to occupy the same ship. There wasn't a flicker of guilt. No hesitation. Just a gleam in her eyes that said she was proud of it. Proud of leaving me for a man who played covers of Elton John for loose change and free cocktails. I didn't make a scene. Not yet. By that evening, she was locked out. Literally. Her keycard didn't work when she tried to slink back into our suite. She probably expected I'd be curled up in bed crying into one of those oversized cruise pillows. But instead, I was sitting on the balcony with a glass of scotch, watching the sunset like a man who had just survived a shipwreck and washed ashore with his pride still intact. She knocked. Lightly at first. Then louder. I didn't move. She banged on the door like a hurricane in heels. I heard muffled curses, the thud of her palm slapping the wood. And then, finally, silence. I waited. And sure enough, about 15 minutes later, I got a call on the room phone. Guest services. Mr. Coleman, the clerk said, professional but clearly amused. Your wife is asking for access to the room. She says it's a mistake. Oh no, I said calmly, no mistake at all. Her belongings were delivered to her new cabin, correct? Yes, sir. We moved her things earlier this afternoon as you requested. She's in a inside cabin. Lower deck. No view. Yes, I remember. I hung up before he could say anything else. For the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. Not because I enjoy being cruel, but because after what she pulled in front of the entire ship, announcing our split like it was a damn sitcom twist, I deserved a moment of control, of clarity. I wanted her to feel what I had felt. The humiliation, the shock, the hollowing out of a soul while the world clapped. That night, I watched them. Ryan hadn't joined her in steerage, of course. No, he had a crew cabin, and as I discovered through the bartender, a quiet man named Dennis who saw everything and had a wicked sense of loyalty, Ryan wasn't exactly the one-woman type. Yeah, he's popular, Dennis had said while polishing a glass. Got 3 other girlfriends this month. All older ladies. All finding themselves. I guess he's a spiritual guide or some sh*T. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my drink. Laura had traded 37 years of marriage, a house, and a retirement plan for a man who recycled women like paper napkins. A man who, that very night, was caught sneaking out of a different cabin at 2 a.m., this time, an elegant widow from Phoenix who looked like she owned a vineyard. When I saw Laura the next morning at the breakfast buffet, she looked different. Makeup smudged. Eyes puffy. That golden cruise glow had dulled to something brittle. She was clutching a tray of eggs and toast like it was the last stable thing in her life. She didn't look at me. Not directly. But I saw her eyes shift when I passed by with 2 new friends I'd made, George and Ellen, a retired military couple from Texas who had overheard her little microphone stunt and taken it upon themselves to declare open social war. "Oh, honey," Ellen whispered with a grin. She just tried to sit at the officer's table and they redirected her to the group singles section. You should have seen her face. The humiliation was spreading like wildfire. Ryan? Nowhere to be seen that morning. Apparently, he had rehearsals. By lunch, the crew was gossiping. By dinner, people were pointing. And I? I remained composed. I dined. I danced. I played poker and told stories. I became the charming widower with a mysterious past. No one needed to know the details, just that my wife had needed space and taken a smaller cabin to reflect on things. No one questioned it. But Laura knew. And now, she was the one being watched. Not adored. Not envied. Watched like a car crash in slow motion. She had walked out of a life built on loyalty, routine, and decency, thinking she'd leveled up into romance and youth. Instead, she had stepped into a hall of mirrors, every reflection worse than the last. By the 4th day, the honeymoon haze she'd wrapped herself in had started to rot. You could see it in her eyes, panicked glances over her shoulder, flinches when the dining staff walked past without offering her a refill, the slight limp in her step from wearing heels to impress a boy who'd already vanished into someone else's sheets. I almost pitied her. Almost. That morning, a printed memo slipped under every cabin door. Open mic night. Passenger talent show. Tonight, 9 p.m. at the Neptune Lounge. Cute tradition. One of those cruise quirks where half-drunk retirees sang Sinatra and clueless grandkids tried magic tricks. Nothing serious. But Laura, I later found out, saw it as something else entirely, a grand gesture. A way to win him back. Because Ryan, the piano clown, was hosting. I don't know if it was desperation, ego, or that delusional little movie she'd been playing in her head, but she signed up to perform. Her name was on the sheet. Right there under L. Coleman. Special song dedication. When I saw it, I nearly spat out my coffee. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, not just emotionally, but tactically. If she wanted to make a scene, she'd learned that theater goes both ways. Because something else had changed since she moved down to steerage. People were talking to me. People who had seen things. Heard things. There was the spa technician who told me Laura had brought Ryan in for a couple's massage on our anniversary night. The housekeeper who said she found 2 empty wine bottles and 1 used toothbrush in the suite bathroom 3 nights in a row. The cruise photographer who had a picture of the 2 of them at the captain's welcome gala, dancing so close it looked like foreplay. Laura told me she skipped that gala because she wasn't feeling well. I collected all of it. Not to use yet. But because the more I learned, the more I understood, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment fling. She'd planned this. Carefully. Like a prison escape. And now she thought she could publicly serenade this man-child, as if that would somehow undo the public spectacle she had already made of our life. As if I hadn't spent almost 4 decades keeping her safe, loved, protected from herself most of all. The Neptune Lounge was packed that night. Every seat full. People with drinks, programs, ready for fun. A few knew what was about to go down. Most didn't. I sat toward the back, shadowed, with a bourbon in hand and a silent fire in my chest. Ryan came out first. In a stupid white button-down with the sleeves rolled and a smile that could melt pudding. He played a few soft jazz numbers, soaking in the giggles from women too bored or too lonely to know better. And then they called her name. Up next, we have a lovely lady many of you have come to know this week. Please welcome Laura Coleman. The lights shifted. A hush fell over the room. People clapped politely. She walked out in a silver gown like she was headed to the damn Oscars. Hair done, lips glossed, fake confidence pouring off her like sweat. She stood by the piano, looked at Ryan. The room held its breath. And then she spoke into the mic. This song is for the man who opened my heart again. For reminding me what it means to feel. For seeing me. The band started. Slow, romantic. Something from the 60s. Her voice cracked on the first line, but she pushed through. She kept stealing glances at him, pleading glances, like he was the rope she was hanging onto while the ship of her sanity sank beneath her. But Ryan? He didn't look up. He never even turned his head. He kept playing, eyes down, jaw tight. Because what Laura didn't know, but what I had learned just hours before, was that Ryan had been fired. Turns out the cruise line got wind of his private engagements with multiple passengers. One too many complaints. One husband had threatened legal action. Another demanded a refund. And the line had had enough. They let him finish the show. But by morning, he'd be escorted off the ship. As Laura hit her final note, holding it a half-second too long, arms outstretched toward a man who no longer gave a damn, the silence that followed was vicious. Polite claps. A few coughs. A muttered yikes from someone up front. And Ryan? He stood. He walked off stage. Didn't even look back. She turned, watching him go. Her face changed mid-expression from triumph to confusion to something hollow. Something breaking. And in that moment, under all those lights, Laura realized something that must have hit her like a gut punch from the ocean itself. She was alone. For the first time in 37 years, there was no hand reaching out to catch her fall. And the audience just moved on. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward silences and strange, forced politeness. I stayed out of her way. She did her best to ignore me, but her eyes always followed me whenever I entered the dining room or walked past the pool. She didn't speak to me directly. Not once. But I could feel the weight of her presence, like the shadow of a mistake she was trying to outrun. Meanwhile, I had a front-row seat to the unraveling of her fairy tale. It was almost sad to watch, really. Ryan, her so-called hero, didn't even have the decency to show his face anymore. I learned from the cruise staff that he'd been escorted off the ship at the next port, along with his luggage, and the last I saw of him, he was standing at the dock with a bag over his shoulder, waving goodbye to the woman who had given up everything for him. And what did Laura do? She stayed in her cabin, reading old magazines and waiting for a text she never received. By the time we docked at St. Thomas, she had barely spoken 5 words to anyone. She hadn't come to dinner. She hadn't gone to the spa. The social butterfly who'd once been the center of every conversation was now a ghost, a pale shadow of herself, fading into the ship's empty corridors. I knew I should feel some semblance of pity for her. After all, she was still my wife, the woman I'd shared a lifetime with. But the truth was, I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. What I felt was something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was satisfaction. Maybe it was just right to see her realizing the consequences of her actions. The real turning point came when we docked at St. Thomas, and I noticed something I hadn't expected. She was trying to leave the ship. She had already packed her things into a single carry-on suitcase, the one I'd seen her haul around when we first boarded. Her face was pale as a ghost. Her eyes frantic, like she was about to miss something important. She was making her way toward the gangway, eyes locked forward, oblivious to everyone around her. I watched from the deck above as she stepped off the elevator, pushing her way through the crowd, past families, past newlywed couples, and right toward the exit. I followed her at a distance, moving quickly but carefully, until I saw her approach the security check-in desk. She was talking to the crew there, her voice frantic. The words I caught, though faint, sent a chill through me. I need to get off this ship. I'm leaving. My passport's been stolen. I'm not staying here another minute. The guard, a young woman with a tired expression, shook her head. Ma'am, we can't just let passengers leave without proper checkout procedures. You'll have to. Laura's hand slammed down on the desk. I'm not asking for permission. You don't understand. I have to leave. Now. Her voice had a desperation to it. I had never heard her sound like this. It wasn't the confident, charismatic Laura I had spent years with. This woman was broken, panicked, scared. I stood back, hidden in the crowd, watching her slowly lose control of her own carefully curated life. And for the first time in days, I felt something like satisfaction roll through me. This was her reality now. This was the life she had chosen. But as I stood there, watching the woman I once knew fall apart, I saw something else. Something unexpected. She turned, eyes wide, looking around frantically, scanning every face in the crowd. And then she saw me. Our eyes locked. Her expression faltered. She took a step back, her lips trembling, then quickly forced a smile. It was so fake, so pitiful, I almost felt embarrassed for her. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice shaking. Why are you following me? I'm not following you, I replied, my voice steady. I'm just here. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out of this. But there was no escape. Not anymore. I just need to get off this ship, she repeated. I can't do this anymore, Tom. You don't understand. You don't get to leave, Laura, I cut in, my tone flat, but cold. Not like this. You don't get to just walk away from everything you've ruined. Not after you made your little speech. Not after you humiliated me in front of everyone. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't speak. Her lips pressed together, and I saw the first crack of vulnerability behind her eyes. The woman who had once been so sure of herself, so certain she could get away with anything, was starting to break down. You want to leave? Fine, I said, stepping forward, the air between us thick with unspoken words. But you're not going anywhere. Not until you understand what you've done. Her head snapped up. There was a flicker of defiance in her eyes, but it was fleeting. I didn't mean to hurt you, Tom, she whispered. I never wanted this. Too late for that, I said, shaking my head. The damage is done, and you're going to have to live with it. Just like I'm going to have to live with watching you fall apart. For a moment, we stood there, facing each other like strangers, the sound of the ship's engines in the background. The world around us was chaotic, but in that brief moment, everything was still, frozen. And as she turned to walk away, her suitcase now dragging behind her, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She didn't know it yet, but I had already won. The game was over. The next few days blurred together in a haze of silence and tension. Laura didn't make a single attempt to contact me. She didn't knock on my door. She didn't try to look for me at any of the ship's events. And for the most part, I didn't look for her either. I didn't need to. She was a ghost. A woman trapped in a life she had created, abandoned by the very person she thought would rescue her. I, on the other hand, had become something else entirely. Something I didn't recognize at first. I was living a new kind of freedom, one I had never felt before. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was something darker, something almost dangerous. I spent my time enjoying the things I had always wanted to do on the cruise but never had the chance to. I attended the late-night comedy shows. I drank too much scotch in the lounge. I took a long walk along the lower deck just to see how empty it felt when I was alone. But every time I crossed paths with someone who knew the story of my wife's betrayal, I saw the looks in their eyes. It was the same as when I'd heard the whispers on the ship, sympathy mixed with a strange kind of curiosity. They all knew what happened. They knew Laura had humiliated me. And now, she was the one paying the price for it. No one wanted to be seen with her, not after what she had done. She was starting to understand that. And I think, deep down, she knew her time was running out. But that was the thing about Laura. She always underestimated how much people would tolerate from her. She thought she could. The days stretched out, and with each passing one, Laura seemed to shrink further into herself. The vibrant woman who had once commanded every room now only occupied the corners, her face hidden behind dark sunglasses or a book she rarely read. I could see her from time to time, standing in the hall, looking at her phone, waiting for it. It was on the 8th night that I saw the full extent of the mess she had created, in the depth of her desperation. It wasn't just about her. It wasn't just the affair, or the public humiliation, or the way she had lied to herself and everyone around her. It was about something deeper, something darker that I hadn't fully realized until I watched her unravel in front of the entire ship. It started with the announcement over the loudspeaker. "Attention, passengers, there will be a special dinner tonight in honor of those celebrating their anniversaries and romantic milestones. Join us at the grand dining room at 7 p.m. for a complimentary 5-course meal." Of course, it wasn't meant for me. The announcement was for couples, people who were still holding on to their dreams of blissful, golden years together. People who hadn't destroyed everything in one selfish, thoughtless act. At dinner, I sat alone. I didn't need anyone to join me. I didn't want to be surrounded by couples. They were just a reminder of everything I had lost, everything Laura had taken from me. But halfway through the meal, as I was savoring the delicate fish entree, I saw her. She was standing at the entrance to the dining room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her eyes darting around the room. She looked frantic. She looked like a person who had no idea where she was anymore, what she was doing, or who she was supposed to be. And there he was, Ryan, the so-called savior of her world. He was standing by the bar, laughing with some of the waitstaff, clearly oblivious to the fact that she had been watching him from across the room. I could see the tension in her body, the way her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted him. She needed him. But he wasn't even acknowledging her existence. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just seeking validation anymore. She wasn't just looking for someone to fill the empty space inside of her. She was desperate for something more. She was trying to get back the life she had discarded, the life she had thrown away for a man who wasn't worth a single ounce of the woman I had married. And now, that man wasn't even giving her the time of day. I watched her eyes flicker back and forth, from him to the empty chair at her table, and I realized just how completely lost she had become. She wasn't trying to find love. She wasn't trying to make amends. She was simply trying to escape from the consequences of her actions, trying to reverse time, trying to make herself feel powerful again by pulling someone else into her drama. It was pathetic. As I watched her standing there, her desperation painted clearly on her face, I felt something shift inside me. Something I hadn't anticipated. A sense of triumph. I had won. I wasn't just free from her. I had escaped the emotional prison she had locked me in for decades. She had betrayed me, but in the end, she was the one who was shackled, her own lies and mistakes holding her captive. And yet, she didn't even see it. She was still so wrapped up in her own world, in the idea of winning back someone who didn't care about her, that she couldn't see how far she had fallen. She didn't see the pathetic little game she was playing with herself. And I, for once, wasn't the one caught in it. I finished my meal and left the dining room without a word to anyone. I didn't even glance at her as I walked past. I had learned everything I needed to know in that moment. She was beyond saving, and even if she could somehow redeem herself, it wasn't going to be with me. She was still standing there when I passed the lobby on my way to the elevator. Ryan was nowhere to be found. The man she had thrown everything away for, the man she had tried to make her second chance, had disappeared, just like the rest of the men who had come and gone in her life. And as I stood there, watching her stand alone in the middle of the crowd, a thought crossed my mind that I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I felt sorry for her. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I missed her. But because she was the one who had destroyed her life. And she was the one who was now paying the price. She had chosen a life of empty thrills, of chasing after fleeting moments that would never last, all the while thinking she was in control. But in the end, she had lost everything. And there was nothing left for her to cling to but the empty shell of the woman she used to be. It wasn't a feeling of pity that moved me, though. It was something else entirely. Relief. Relief that I was done. I wasn't the one stuck in this mess anymore. I had chosen my own path, and the person I had been walking that path with was now just a shadow in my past. She had made her choice. And now, I was living with the freedom she could never understand. The next day, she was gone from the ship. Just like that. No announcement. No goodbye. She was simply gone. And I didn't look back. The morning she was gone, I didn't feel a thing. Not relief. Not triumph. Just silence. I woke up to an empty cabin, and for a moment, it felt like she'd never existed at all. Her side of the bed was untouched, her things gone. There was no note, No final confrontation, no last desperate plea for forgiveness. Just the quiet hum of the ship as it cut through the sea. I almost found it fitting. After everything, she couldn't even be bothered to face me one last time. No apology. No regrets. Just an exit as quiet as the one she had planned for the life we had built together. It was surreal, like I was floating in a dream where the rules of everything we'd once shared no longer applied. And yet, as I stood on the balcony, watching the waves below, I realized that the silence wasn't just about her absence. It was about me finally being free of her, of the weight of the lies, the secrets, the betrayals. I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. I didn't have to second-guess everything I said or did. It was like a storm had passed, and the air was finally still. The only noise left was the sound of my own breath, steady and calm. I spent the rest of that day in a haze of calm detachment, walking the decks, watching the shorelines blur into the horizon. The ship felt different now, emptier somehow. The air tasted fresher, lighter. There was no tension in the hallways, no heavy, awkward pauses when people caught sight of me. It was as if everyone knew. Everyone who had witnessed her spectacle, her humiliating performance, had finally understood the truth. And then, the next evening, as the sun began to set, something unexpected happened. I found myself walking toward the lounge, where a group of passengers had gathered for the final event of the cruise, the farewell party. It was meant to be a celebration, a farewell to the journey we'd all shared. But as I entered the room, I didn't expect to see her. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not after everything. But there she was, sitting at a table in the far corner, nursing a glass of wine. Her hair was no longer styled. She looked tired, worn down, like she hadn't slept in days. The bright, confident woman I had once known was gone, replaced by a shadow of regret and confusion. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her. She didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in her own world, staring into her drink as if it might offer her some solace. And then, almost instinctively, our eyes met. Her gaze flickered with recognition, but there was no confrontation this time. No anger. No blame. Just a cold, empty silence between us. I could see it in her eyes. She was lost. She wasn't the woman who had left me for a fleeting affair. She wasn't the woman who had destroyed our life together. She was just lost. I didn't move. I didn't walk over to her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I simply turned away and walked out of the room, out of the lounge, back toward the deck. The ship was nearly empty now. The last few days had stripped away the unnecessary distractions. The vacationers were all gone, or at least hiding in their rooms, trying to forget the truth that had unfolded in front of their eyes. Laura's presence was just another ghost, another relic of a past I had already buried. But what struck me was how small she had become. In the beginning, she had been the force in our marriage, the one who made the decisions, the one who had all the answers. She was the one people listened to, the one who controlled the narrative. And now? Now she was just a woman who had ruined everything for the sake of a lie. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I had nothing left to give her. No more apologies to offer, no more explanations to demand. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it, alone. I spent the rest of the night on the deck, staring at the dark water stretching out before me. The ship was slowly making its way back toward the mainland, back to the real world. But I wasn't thinking about the shore. I wasn't thinking about anything at all, really. It had been a long, painful journey. But it was over. It was finally over. The next morning, the ship docked. And with it, I walked off into a new chapter of my life, a chapter where the past no longer had a hold on me. Laura would stay behind, carrying the weight of everything she had destroyed. I wasn't looking back. Not for her. Not for anyone. The first few days back on solid ground felt like a strange kind of freedom, but it wasn't the freedom I'd expected. There were no immediate celebrations, no grand moments of triumph. It was just quiet. I walked through the days, each step feeling lighter than the one before. But the weight of the past wasn't gone entirely. It lingered, just below the surface, in the corners of my thoughts. Laura's face. Her words. The way she looked at me when she realized everything had fallen apart. But I wasn't chasing that anymore. The city felt different now. People walked by, unaware of what had transpired on a cruise ship in the middle of nowhere, a world away. It wasn't long. Barely a page. No apology. No explanation. Just a rattled chain of sentences scrawled in handwriting I hadn't seen in weeks and barely recognized anymore. Tom, I know I have no right to write you. I'm not asking you to forgive me. But I want you to know something. Ryan wasn't the first. There were others. You were never supposed to find out. I was careful. So careful. But I see now. That was the worst part. I didn't stop. I didn't feel sorry. I just kept hiding it and pretending it didn't count because you were always there. Constant. Loyal. Good. You were too good for me, Tom. I never believed I deserved that kind of love. So I burned it. I destroyed it. I wanted to ruin it before it left me. But I see now, I was the one who left first. You don't have to respond. I'll never bother you again. I just needed you to know. That was it. No signature. Just a blank line at the bottom, like even her name was too ashamed to show its face. I read it again. And again. And the only feeling I could describe was nausea, not just from what she wrote, but from how calm I felt reading it. Because this was it. The last mask pulled off. The final betrayal wasn't what she did on that cruise. It was everything she hid before it. The dinners she skipped, the trips she had to take for work, the cold shoulder, the fake headaches. All the pieces slid into place like a cursed jigsaw puzzle I'd spent decades staring at without realizing the picture. This wasn't about Ryan. He was just the final one. The loudest, the messiest, the one she couldn't contain. There were others. And I'd never known. She had looked me in the eye every day, kissed me goodbye, made me breakfast, smiled across the table while our retirement fund grew and our friends called us the steady ones. And all the while, she was lying. Over and over. And worse, not feeling a damn thing about it. It was like someone had opened the floor under my memory. Every moment of kindness, of comfort, of love infected. I don't remember standing. I don't remember walking to the kitchen. But I do remember the sound of the paper tearing. I ripped it slowly. Not in rage. Not in panic. In quiet, deliberate silence, as if by destroying the letter, I could cauterize the wound it reopened. I dropped the shredded pieces into the sink and turned on the tap. Watched the water run over the ink until it blurred into nothing. Her words, her truth, vanishing like smoke. And when the last bit swirled down the drain, I exhaled. Just once. Deep and long, like I'd been holding my breath since the day she first stepped onto that ship and smiled at another man. That night, I went to the fireplace and took out the small lacquered box I hadn't touched in months. Inside were the photos, wedding, anniversaries, holidays, the two of us grinning like fools frozen in time. I stared at them, searching for signs, clues in our eyes. Anything to tell me she had been someone different before she became that. But no, she looked the same in all of them. And maybe that was the worst part. There had never been a line. No sharp moment where she switched. Just a slow fade into someone else. Someone crueler. Emptier. I put the box on the flames and didn't look away. I thought I'd cry. I thought the grief would rush back, that my hands would tremble. But nothing came. I just watched them burn, the paper curling into black, the past folding in on itself. By morning, I felt clean. Hollow, maybe, but clean. Like I'd finally cut out the tumor that had been wrapped around my heart for so long I forgot what it felt like to breathe without pain. Later that week, Rachel texted. Just a simple, thinking about you. Want to grab coffee? And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled without effort, because I knew Laura's story with me was over. But mine? Mine was about to begin again. We met at the same cafe. Rachel was already at the table by the window when I walked in, sipping something with foam and cinnamon on top. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Not out of pity, not with that half-sad look people give you when they know what you've been through. It was a real smile. Warm, steady, honest. And for a moment, it caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. Being seen by someone without judgment, without a ledger of betrayal hanging between us. Just seen. Hey, I said, sliding into the chair across from her. Hey yourself, she said. You look better. I let out a quiet laugh. I feel lighter. I can tell, she said. There's something different in your eyes. Something sharp, but not hard. We talked. Not about Laura. Not about the letter. That chapter was finished. Burned, literally and metaphorically. Instead, we talked about everything else. Books. Music. The years we missed. She'd started volunteering at a literacy program for kids. I told her I was thinking about taking a road trip down the coast. I've got no one waiting on me, I said, smiling over my cup. No clock to punch, just miles of freedom. She tilted her head, considering me. You know, she said, for a guy who just went through hell, you're surprisingly whole. I nodded slowly. Because I went through it. Not around it. Not over it. Right through the fire. And now, I'm still standing. She smiled again, but softer this time. She reached out, not dramatically, just enough to place her hand over mine on the table. No pressure. No expectations. Just presence. That was the first time I felt the future again. Like a sunrise after a storm that felt like it would never end. I walked her to her car. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting a golden haze over the sidewalk. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. Nothing more. And it was perfect. I stood there for a long while after she left, hands in my pockets, air cool against my skin, heart steady for the first time in months. I thought about the cruise. I thought about Laura, about how she stood there in that spotlight, desperate for applause, and how quickly the world moved on. I thought about the letter, the admission, the years of lies, and how they felt like acid when they finally surfaced. But mostly, I thought about how none of it mattered now, because I had made it out. I had been humiliated, broken, stripped of everything I thought was solid. But I hadn't begged. I hadn't lashed out. I hadn't burned down the ship. I let her sink herself. And I walked away dry. I left the cruise a different man. Not bitter. Not jaded. Just awake. Finally awake. People say when a marriage ends, it's like a death. They talk about grief, stages, closure. But the truth is, sometimes it's not about mourning the love that died. It's about realizing how long you let yourself live with less than you deserved. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried to make someone else comfortable. So if there's anyone out there, anyone standing in that same storm I went through, here's what I want you to know. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your dignity in exchange for betrayal. And you don't have to carry the weight of someone else's shame. You can start over. You can walk away. Even if it takes you years. Even if it takes a cruise ship disaster and a woman tearing her own life apart in front of hundreds of strangers. There is always a way forward. And mine starts now.